over to Tim. I hope you enjoy your tasting.
Well, hi everybody. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for joining. It's my pleasure to introduce Charlie Sichel, who I've known for many years. Charlie has very kindly agreed on Bastille Day to actually give up his afternoon for us. And it's not just Bastille Day, it's also his wedding anniversary. So a very easy way to remember his wedding anniversary, obviously, is to get married on Bastille Day. So welcome to Charlie. Can you see me, Charlie? Because I can't see you.
I can see you very well. Yeah.
Excellent. So welcome, Charlie. You're in your office by the look of things.
I am.
You must be the only person working in Sichel today.
It's very quiet. It's actually very nice for a change. But yeah, hi to everyone at the Wine Society. Yeah.
So
great to be here.
Maybe we should kick off, Charlie, by you giving a little bit of history about. I think you're which generation are you now? The sixth. And there is a new generation as well. So maybe you can kick off by just doing a little potted history in a couple of minutes and then explain to us the role of the negociant, because you have a kind of dual role, really, don't you? You have various activities.
Yes, we do. We do. Well, Maison Sichel was set up in Bordeaux in 1883. And as was the case in those days, most of the negociant companies were set up by foreign families. Our roots are from England and Germany before that. My family's been in wine since 1785 or around then anyway, but set up originally as a buying office with headquarters in London. And as time went on, became more and more independent until the mid-70s, where Bordeaux was a standalone company. Before that, we were part of, HQ was in London, and we had offices in New York, in Germany, manufacturing wine in Germany. Our claim to fame, if I dare mention it, was Blue Nun, of course, and anyway, all that came to a stop in the mid-70s when we became independent. But Bordeaux has always been family-owned and run, and it's still the case today. And as you were saying, Tim, my brothers and I. The sixth generation, and the seventh generation has joined us, or is beginning to join us. Yeah, so, in fact, you can see in the picture there.
People can see the picture there. Perhaps you could take us through. So there's two generations there.
That's
maybe
right.
You can explain very briefly people's roles within the organisation as part of the negociant and chateau owning activities.
Sure. So if we start from left to right, on the left is Alex, who is Alan's eldest son. Alan, who's in the middle of the picture with glasses. Alex is in charge of Château Trillol in the south of France. He's been there and has been in charge of that for the last 2 years. Very exciting things going on there. Maybe we'll talk about that a little later on. Then it's James. James looks after all the commercial side of things, North America, South America, Canada, and Switzerland. Then is Ben, who makes Châteaux Angludet. And Trillol, actually, Château Angludet, Trillol, and has an eye on Châteaux Angulais as well, which we may be talking about a bit later on as well. Then it's Alan, managing director of our group. Then it's moi, and I look after the UK market with Max, who is right next to me there, young Max, and I do the Middle East and the Far East as well. And then is David, my youngest brother, and he looks after the Benelux country, Eastern Europe and Russia. And James and I are twins. So in order of appearance, Alan is eldest, James and I, then Ben, David, and then Alex and Max.
And so perhaps, Charlie, you can just explain so you own chateaux. So you own Angludet, which is member favorite for many years in Margaux. You own Algadans, and we buy the white and red from time to time. We have a shipment of red, which is going into our Christmas list, the 2016 Algadans red, which is particularly good. And that's coming in September, October. And then you also have as Emma mentioned at the start, a share in Palmer, Château Palmer, the famous Margaux property, and then Trillol as well. So you have your chateau owning element to the business, but then you have the pure négociant activity as well. Maybe you could just explain very briefly what that is, Charlie.
Sure. Well, négociant activity is actually a wine merchant. It's buying and selling other people's wines. Now, when we were originally set up back in 1883, we were only a négociant. And in fact, the prosperity of the whole region and of the city of Bordeaux comes from the used to be all-powerful and wealthy négociant companies. The producers were seen as peasant farmers, and the rules of the négociants were what everyone went by. It's rather changed now, but my grandfather was adamant back in 1938 that the future of a company like ours was at least to control the source, at best to own it. And that's when he bought a major shareholding in Château Palmer. Now, it was just before the Second World War, and it was a very difficult period, lots of uncertainty, even more than there is now. So he decided to go into it with a couple of mates at the time. What a good decision that turned out to be. But a négociant company is really a wine merchant. So we buy wines from all over, entry, mid, and Grand Cru Classé, and distribute around the world.
Excellent. So let's talk about Angludet. So perhaps we can move on to the next pictures. The next few pictures are some aerial shots of Angludet, and perhaps you can see it. So there's one of the vineyards. I think I'm right in saying, Charlie, that all your vineyards pretty much surround the chateau, don't they?
Yeah, yes. The vineyards of Châteaux Angludet are in a single block. Actually, I think there's a picture coming up which you'll be able to see. So that's there you have the house and the cellars and the surrounding grounds. But on the next slide, you'll be able to see, there you go, the vineyard, which is in one block. So as you're looking at the picture there, all the vines that you can see in front of you are the 32 hectares of vines of Châteaux Angludet. That's quite rare to have a vineyard that size in one block, but that's one of the characteristics of Angludet. And we are totally surrounded by Cru Classé. On the left, beyond the tree line there, on right on the left, on the left-hand side is Château Giscourt, and on the right is Château du Tertre, and behind us, which you can't see from here, is Château Kirouan, and vineyards of Château Lascombe, Brane Cantenac, and Cantenac Brown dotted around the place.
So you have some very smart neighbours then.
Yeah, Yeah, and in fact, the fact that all seems a little bit odd that Angludet was not classified in 1855. It wasn't, because at the time the previous owner had split the property amongst his 4 heirs, who decided to go off and make their own Châteaux Angludet. And one of the parameters of the 1855 classification was that it had to be over the vintages and years, and from one bottle to the next, fairly homogeneous. Which, of course, with 4 different winemakers, it wasn't going to happen. So we didn't make the cut, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a shame, because you could charge more for your wine. But to the Wine Society's members' advantage, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we're delighted. We're delighted.
And your father bought it in 1961, is that correct?
That's right, 1961. Now, yeah, great vintage, but Angludet was, in fact, I was going to say, was recovering from the 1956 frost, which it wasn't actually, because there was no money in growing grapes and winemaking in those days. And if you didn't have the money to replant, and the 1956 frost was totally ruined the whole region, in fact, and Angludet, of course, was part of it. It was a very late frost, and the sap had started rising, and it got so cold so quickly that the sap inside the vines froze and split the vines, and they died. So when my parents bought in 61, the property had been abandoned completely, and there were 4 hectares of vines left. Between 56 and 61, the previous proprietor, it was easier to graze cattle, sell milk and butter to neighboring villages than it was to grow grapes and make wine. So they started and embarked on a full renovation program.
How amazing. It's staggering.
Yeah.
That's staggering. Could we move on to the
gamble,
next pictures, maybe? Just to, I'm trying to remember what the next picture is, but are we able to see the next picture? Here we go. There we go. Now, this is Charlie on the left, and
that's it.
And then it is Jasmine, who is your daughter.
Then is my eldest daughter, Jasmine, and she, in fact, lives in London and looks after our social media communication.
And then you've got Ben, the winemaker. This is stood outside the chateau. I think that was when I visited you last year.
That's
and
it.
Last but not least is Daisy. And
that's
Daisy
right.
has a role actually at Angludet, which perhaps you can mention Daisy's role, and then we'll go on to the next picture.
That's right. I mean, one thing that has developed in a very big way in Bordeaux is œnotourism. People visiting Bordeaux to visit properties, vineyards, understand more, taste, and so on. And until Daisy came along, we weren't really that well equipped, but she showed tremendous interest and excitement at taking on the job, which is a big job, and it's a you know, almost a 7-day week job in season, and so there is a lot to do and a lot to revolutionize at Angludet as well. So any private punter visiting Angludet will be taken care of by Daisy,
And Daisy came up with this marketing ploy, if I recall. And you said, don't ask me about the sexy date night picture, but I'm going to ask you about the sexy date night picture, Charlie.
Well, she's identified every vintage as you know, sort of
a specific character for each vintage. Yeah,
that's right, exactly.
A specific occasion for each vintage.
Yes. So the 11 is sexy date night. I don't know. She would. I tell you what. When Wine Society members visit Angludet, she can do the explaining.
So, as it's your wedding anniversary, will you be having 2011 Angludet tonight, Charlie?
Yes, good idea.
Night.
Definitely, yeah.
So that's Angludet, and just so for people who are interested, we are our En Primeur 2019 offer is going out next week, and Angludet 19 will form a part of that offer. And I can tell you, I tasted it. Charlie sent me a sample. Obviously, I couldn't visit the chateau this year, but Charlie sent me a sample, which I tasted at home, and it's lovely. Perhaps we can move on to the next picture, because I think I took some pictures when I visited harvest time. Yes, so there's Ben and Max. So Ben, the winemaker at Angludet, and Max, who covers the UK market along with Charlie. And maybe the next picture as well. So these are pictures of Merlot grapes that were coming in when I visited with Steve Finlan last October. Steve Finlan, the chief executive of the Wine Society. And you can see very healthy grapes there that had been sorted through the sorting machine. And maybe the next picture as well. There you go. There's the sorting machine at work. So the grapes were small and very healthy. But Charlie, maybe talk a little bit about the 19 vintage.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we are subjected to the weather, like in any vintage. And 2019, there were a couple of white knuckle rides early on with a couple of very cold spells, and that's always a big worry. There are a few vegetative in the vegetative cycle. There are a few moments which are absolutely crucial, and one is the start of the budding combined with the end of the risk of spring frost. Because that can annihilate the harvest, as we found out in 2017. A late frost, and that was it. We had zero harvest. So it was the first time it ever happened in 2017. 2018 we had a bit of mildew, well, quite a lot actually. So 2019 is the first vintage when things are back to normal. And really, apart from those couple of moments, couple of evenings on the night of April the 14th and April the 15th, and then again on May the 5th and May the 6th, then vegetative cycle was very good. With in the height of the summer, temperatures reaching for a short while 43 degrees centigrade. Wow. Which didn't really have so much of an impact on vines, because the risk there is the vines can close down and go on survival mode, and therefore no longer feed the grapes, and the grapes stop ripening. Because even though we had hot days, they were followed by cool nights. So you have that sort of high and low effect. So the ripening process carries on.
Certainly, one of the characters I've noticed in tasting quite a lot of 19 samples has been the freshness in the wine. So quite a lot of the wines have a slightly higher alcohol level than the kind of average for the last 10 years. But the wines never taste like it because they've got such lovely freshness. And I think Angludet does as well. Right.
I know. Well, thank you. And I think, you know, part of that freshness is vintage, of course, but part of the precision of the taste as well, I think, is probably brought on by the biodynamic farming, which Ben has undertaken for the last 3 years now at Angludet. And the wines will be fully certified biodynamic, not that that's a sort of means to an end, by in 2021. So as not this vintage next year will be fully certified. Now, this is very important. Part of the precision we felt, or has felt, is that is due to that biodynamic farming, but maybe compressed slightly with too much oak aging. And therefore, in 2018, we introduced as an experimental to experiment 4 amphorae. And they're 750 litre amphorae. They're made in Italy. That seems to sublime that freshness, that precision, and really brings it through, and it follows through the whole process without the oak compressing that. So it worked well in 18. We repeated that in 2019 as well. So the blend of 2019 is 43% Merlot, 45% Cabernet Sauvignon, and 12% Petit Verdot. Petit Verdot is a big component.
I know Ben likes his Petit Verdot, doesn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he feels it really ties the Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon together. It really helps the blend come together.
Okay, great. The next photograph is worth having a quick chat about, I think. Let's have a look. There we go. So, so when I visit at harvest time, normally there is a pickers lunch. I try and arrive, so I meet the pickers, and it's often the same people every year. So this photograph was taken in October when I visited with Steve Finlan, and there's always a pickers lunch, but I'm sure that the Sichel family made a bit more of an effort for this particular lunch, because I had the chief executive of the Wine Society with me. You can see a bottle of Angludet 13 that was passed around during the lunch, and it's a very convivial occasion, and it's an important part of the whole vintage, isn't it, Charlie?
It is. It is. I mean, it's when everyone works hard, and you know, no one counts their hours. It can be a 24/7 job. Although a lot of things are automated these days with temperature control in the vats during fermentation and so on. But it's a very joyous, it's a very happy occasion, especially when the weather's nice and everything's going well.
Yeah.
So it's good fun, and lunches and dinners are good fun. Yeah.
Good. Let's move on to Châteaux Angludet, if we can move on to the next images. So tell us a little bit. We buy the wine, the white, sporadically. Oh no, sorry, that's Palmer. That's not Angludet.
Yeah, that's not Angludet.
Maybe we'll talk about Palmer first. So maybe just explain the ownership of Palmer briefly. I mean, this is a wine that that we buy through you, because we don't buy the wine through the chateau. We buy it through the négociants, and we buy Palmer through yourselves for obvious reasons. But perhaps just talk a little bit about the ownership.
Well, the ownership is relatively unchanged since 1938. And in fact, there are 3 flags flying at the top of the chateau, as you can see. Not a windy day, so you can't really tell the difference. But the three flags, there's one French flag, which is there for the Boutillier family. They are owners in the property as well. There's a Dutch flag, because the Marlebest family are owners in Château Palmer, and the third is a British flag for ourselves. The partnership works very well. Château Palmer, again, much like Angludet, but a few years earlier, really only started being prosperous recently. If only my grandfather would know what it has become, what his investment and what his call was on making that purchase has become, I think he'd be quite proud of himself, and quite rightly so. Château Palmer is 66 hectares, AOC Margate, a third Cru Classé. and is successful, well distributed all over the world, and that is managed by a completely separate team at the chateau as a standalone company.
And we offered the 19 vintage along with a lot of other UK merchants. I can't remember exactly what the price was, but it was, you know, this is a £200 bottle, so probably almost 10 times as expensive as Angludet, which is only about what, a mile and a bit away, Charlie, something like that.
Well, as the crows fly, 3 kilometers away. So about a couple of miles. Yeah.
So there's Château Palmer. Okay, we're going to move on to Trillol now. While you're explaining a little bit about Trillol, I'm just going to go and get my battery pack because I'm running low on juice. But if you could maybe start to talk about Arcadans, it'll take me about 1 minute. Sure.
Arcadans is a property we bought in 2002, and that is at the sort of most southern tip of the Bordeaux region. It's at the end of, it's close to the town of Langon and the opposite side of the river to the Sauterne, white sweet wine producing area of Bordeaux. And we decided to buy it because we have our Bel Air winery close by. And we'll be talking about that in a minute when we talk about the Society's Claret, which we have been making for some years now. There at Château Angludet, we're able to run experiments in viticulture to get the best possible grapes and trying to keep costs as low as possible. Arcadans is AOC Bordeaux Supérieur, so it's more modestly priced than Château Angludet and of course Château Palmer. We have 40 hectares in one block on one of the highest points of the sort of southern region of Bordeaux, and it's a mix of Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc. The vines there are reared not biodynamically, but more sustainable agriculture. Biodynamic costs a lot of money with significant risks, and so we're not quite ready to go as far as biodynamic with Château Angludet, but sustainable agriculture is the way we do it.
And the white, Charlie, is Sauvignon and Semillon?
Sauvignon, 65% Sauvignon, 65% Sauvignon, 35% Semillon. Yeah. So, and the majority is red. 4/5 of what we produce there is red. 1/5 is white.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we'll be getting the 2016 red in for our Christmas list, so it will be available, I think, from October. I have a glass here, and jolly good it is too. So managed to find. I didn't have a bottle of the same wine that Charlie has in front of him, which I think is the Society's Claret. But I did have some Arcadans. So cheers. Anyway.
Cheers.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the last thing we're going to cover, and this is a very important part of, certainly for the Wine Society, and I hope for Sichel too. For more than a quarter of a century, the Sichels have been our source of the Society's Claret, and this is our best-selling red wine. So every year I come down, meet up with Charlie and meet up with Yvan Mayal, who's the gentleman you can see in the background of the photograph. And together we blend the new vintage of the Society's Claret. This was actually the 18 vintage, not the 19 vintage. Yvan was very ill with coronavirus, but thankfully has recovered. Do send him our best from the Wine Society when you speak to him.
I will. Thank you. Thank you.
So maybe explain a little bit about where it's made, Charlie. Obviously, Yvan and I do the blend along with yourself, but perhaps explain a little bit about where the grapes come from and where it's vinified.
Yeah. Well, I just touched on that when talking about Châteaux Angludet, because Châteaux Angludet is right next to our Bel Air winery, and the Bel Air winery is it's modelled on a sort of cooperative format, in that we don't own any vines down there, and of course this is keeping Châteaux Angludet completely separate, where we own the vines and the buildings and the cellars and everything else. But about 3 miles away is the Bel Air winery. We have the winery surrounded by vines, and we buy grapes from about 55 different growers that cover about 350 hectares of vines. Most of it are red grapes, and some of them are white. From there, we make wines at the winery. We have 5 enologists working for us day in, day out, so all year round, and they work with those different proprietors to ensure that the grapes they bring us are of the best possible quality. Hence, Châteaux Angludet next door, where we run the experiments, and if they're conclusive in optimizing, maximizing quality, then we ask them to do the same. Okay. And that has worked very well, and I think shows in the quality of product that we make there. It's a great tool to do contract winemaking. And there we work with you, Tim, and others. We do a lot of contract winemaking for airlines. We used to. Another different story now, and so on. But it's a lot easier to be more precise if we take it from the grassroots, so to speak, and make wine according to a specific style, as opposed to using finished wine and blending to the best of our ability to make something more approximate. So we're able to be much more precise. And I think that's kind of worked for the Society's claret.
Well, we've taken every vintage for the last, it's probably nearer 30 years actually, and there's a reason for that. Yeah. And I think, I know you work with other merchants in the UK to make their, some of their clarets as well. But I think the style of wine that we make is possibly slightly different from some, in that we don't want oak flavour. We just want a wine that tastes typically of Bordeaux, but is easy drinking and soft, and gives you plenty of bang for your buck. We've got 2 vintages actually available at the moment, 18 vintage and 19, both £7.50 a bottle, and both actually came through in Wine Champions. So I think that's testament to the work that the Sichels are doing behind the scenes, to give me and to give Yvan, the technical director at Sichel, the raw materials to actually blend up some really, really good vintages of the Society's claret. I think the Society's claret has never been better.
And I was looking through my notes, Tim, and realised that this is the 3rd year in a row, or maybe even 4th, that the Society's clarets come through.
It was the 16, the 18, and the 19 vintages.
Yeah, third year in a row. Yeah. So we're proud of that.
Yeah, and rightly so. Great. Well, that's been a whistle-stop tour, but I'm conscious that members have probably, and participants have probably got some questions. So shall we go on to the Q&A part?
Sure. Great.
Excellent. So we've had quite a few questions come in, actually. One of the questions that come in, which it touches on what you've just been talking about, members asking, what is the exact difference between the Châteaux Angludet and the Society's Claret in terms of the blend?
In terms of the blend, well, they are slightly different. So the Society's Claret, the varietal mix of the 2019 is 51% Merlot, 37% Cabernet Franc, 37% Cabernet Sauvignon, 12% Cabernet Franc. Argonau's Red 16 is 63% Merlot, 32% Cabernet Sauvignon, and 5% Cabernet Franc.
And of course, Argonau's is aged in oak, isn't it?
It is. Argonau's is part oak aged when the Society's Claret isn't. And the other thing, of course, is the Argonau's comes from the vineyard of Châteaux Angludet. The grapes of the Society's Claret come from a selection of those 55 growers made to measure.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Chris Jeffries has come in with a question. He says he's a huge fan of Châteaux Angludet over the years. Could he ask why they decided to take Angludet out of the Cru Bourgeois system? He agrees that it should be a Cru Classé anyway, but it's more difficult to move into that.
It is. Well, thank you very much anyway for those lovely comments. Angludet decided, oh gosh, it must be some 10, 15 years ago, maybe more, that Angludet has not been part of the Cru Bourgeois association, because Angludet is part of the Union des Grands Crus. And seeing that both associations do the same job, and they're the members, organizing tastings around the world and communicating on those on the wines as a group or individually, there was no point being part of both. It costs money to be part of either, we felt Angludet was more suited to be part of the Union des Grands Crus than the Cru Bourgeois. And also it was at a time, and I think the Cru Bourgeois Association has greatly cleaned up their act recently, and they've done a great job. But at the time when Angludet left, there were Cru Bourgeois which were, right at the entry level in Bordeaux, and right up to the Angludet level, and it was difficult for it to. It wasn't making much sense. The Cru Bourgeois classification wasn't making much sense.
Yeah.
So, that's why we're no longer Cru Bourgeois. But we're members of the Union des Grands Crus, which is a great privilege because we're part of all the Cru Classés, and in that mix, which is great.
Excellent. Now, somebody has emailed in anonymously with a question. Do you think that more of the top chateaux will dispense of en primeur and the négociants over the next 10 years or so?
Sorry, can you say again?
Do you think that more of the top chateaux will dispense with the en primeur system, so they'll go direct, and the négociants themselves over the next 10 years or so?
I don't think so. And much as there's ongoing debate about that, and it's always fascinating, and there's always a reason to argue from either side. But if 2019 campaign, which has we've just finished, which the Wine Society is in the middle of or about to begin, if that's anything to go by, the primeur campaigns, the future primeur campaigns have a long way to go. It's always a question of price. that when there is advantage of buying en primeur, then the market reacts positively. When there isn't, it doesn't. And it's purely a supply and demand. Of course, there's always talk of, chateaus, on the edge of charging too much. In fact, those that do charge too much won't sell. Simple as that. So when they are at the right price, they sell well. When they're not, they don't. And it's,
what percentage of your production, Charlie, sorry to interrupt, what percentage typically of your production at Angludet would you sell en primeur?
Ideally about 60%, but we try and limit it to 60%. It's not always easy when there is often a lot of demand for Angludet, and often we sort of edge over that to 70, 75%, and in some cases, in 2015, for example, I think it was more 90%.
That was partly because you did a special cuvee for us, wasn't it? more of which are non. But the Wine Society, I believe, Charlie, gets the biggest allocation of anyone for Angludet.
The Wine Society is our biggest allocated distributor for Angludet in the world. Yeah. So we feel, not that we know all of them individually, but we've met quite a number of members over the years. And yeah. If I can use this moment to invite any member to Châteaux Angludet and visit and taste and come see us, you're always very welcome.
Great.
Fantastic. So the next question, we've actually got two questions from Pauline Shearsmith. The first of which was, she visited Chateau Palmer in 1993 and you just started fermenting in stainless steel vats rather than in wood. Have you continued to do this, or do you still ferment in traditional wood?
No, stainless steel vats. In fact, we've done away with the wooden vats completely. They've been dismantled and they're long gone. The stainless steel vats work extremely well. For wines or grapes when they come in and for fermentation, they're much more efficient than wood. Wooden vats don't bring on and don't offer any of the advantages of oak barrels, which the oak barrels offer. They're very difficult to keep clean. It takes time to look after them. Stainless steel is easy. Temperature control is very precise and ideal. So we've not changed. That's what we've done. What we have done, though, is on the stainless steel vats, we've split them in half horizontally. So we've doubled up the number of vats, but without doubling the number of units, if you see what I mean, so that we can isolate single plots. And the more isolation there is, and the more plots we can isolate, and the more precise the blends can be for maximizing quality.
Fantastic. And her next question is, are you experimenting with Spanish or Portuguese grape varieties as other regional producers seem to be doing?
We haven't got there yet. I know some have done and some are. With global warming, there's a big question of using more resistant grape varieties. And they, whether red or white, come from Portugal, but where we've not planted those. You can only plant them on special request, but it's authorized. You're allowed to do it, but it's going to be a long time before I think we get into that. We're not quite ready for that yet.
Don't think Palmer's quite ready to be planting Touriga Nacional yet, is it?
Excellent. And the final question then is one that does come up often. I think many of our members are real foodies at heart. What food would you pair with your wine? So we talked a lot about Châteaux Angludet and obviously the Society's Claret as well.
Well, you know, I think wines from Bordeaux are generally, rather more on the sort of fine, elegant side of things, less powerful than other parts of the world, so I think sort of simple but quality food is always preferable. For Society's Claret, you know, a lovely roast chicken or a plate of soft, reasonably mild cheeses, and with Angludet, a lovely barbecued steak with a touch of salt and pepper, but nothing more than that, and just very simple, and often it'll combine very well, very well.
That sounds absolutely perfect. I actually have a glass of the Society's Claret, the 2018 vintage. So
well, I have the 2019.
Excellent. I will be looking for a roast chicken for my dinner.
Definitely.
Well, I think that's it in terms of questions. Tim, was there anything else you would like to add before
No, I don't think so. I'd obviously like to thank everybody for joining us, and for Charlie particularly for giving up his Bastille day, at least half of it, for the Wine Society. I hope you have a good sexy date night, Charlie, and look forward to seeing you in Bordeaux. Maybe I'll visit at harvest if I can get permission to visit Bordeaux.
Well, look forward to seeing you, definitely, and thank you to the Wine Society for your support over the years. And as I was saying earlier, everyone's very welcome at any time to come and visit.
Well, thank you very much, and happy anniversary as well.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.